And we have Janet Ivey from Janet's Planet and a whole bunch of other projects that you've been involved with, joining us for our second interview. This is the Humans to Mars Summit series of interviews. We'll be interviewing celebrities and STEM gurus, people who are promoting the idea that Mars is a great place to visit. And while we will be talking about Mars, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of other things as well. So Janet, welcome to this interview. And hopefully we'll have people joining from around the world. I know that people will be watching it live because it is being streamed on livingmaths.com. So Janet, welcome.
Welcome to you guys. Hello, and thank you so much for having me this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are in this world.
Well, for us it's evening. I think for you it's morning. So here comes the first question.
Okay.
Every superhero has an origin story. And I'd like to know where yours started, because you might not have always been into STEM. You might not have always been into space. So it must have started somewhere. Maybe you can give us some background on all of that.
So imagine that we have these, when I was a kid on the playground, we literally had these monkey bars that looked like spacecraft. And so, you know, the missions of Apollo were still going. So Star Trek was huge. And my friend Carol actually had like walkie-talkies. So occasionally she would sneak them in her backpack and we would play astronaut on the playground. But my real origin story probably begins when I am 10 years old. And a teacher named Miss Ernestine Yarborough was my teacher. She was in her second year of teaching, and she was the grooviest person I have ever known. It's 1977, and I was, believe it or not, I have grown out of it, but I was a little bit shy back then. But Miss Ernestine had a way. And so one Friday night in the fall of 1977, Miss Ernestine brings her telescope to the playground, invites parents and kids, anybody who wants to come and view the stars and planets. And this other very groovy lady named Miss Carolyn, they were so super cool. They had their bell bottoms on, their brilliant hair. And I witnessed two amazing women pointing out Cassiopeia and showing me Saturn through the telescope for the first time. And they just opened up a world of possibility in that star program that evening. Later that year, Miss Ernestine also, she really obviously loved the solar system. So she made each of us or assigned each of us a planet, and mine was Saturn. And I can remember my little poster board and my standing up there giving my report on the rings of Saturn and what they were made of. And I guess for me, that was a moment when I thought I could also do science. I was always I was playing the piano at that time. I was playing saxophone. I loved to sing, all of those art things. But Miss Ernestine was great. She would come by and she would whisper things in your ear that were meant for you and you alone. And I remember her one time saying, "Now, Janet, science isn't just for the boys. It's for girls too." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And she loved so fiercely, and you just wanted to please this lady, that I really hold her up, I guess, as the metric that I measure how I teach and want to inspire other kids. So for me, my love of the stars and planets really began in 5th grade.
Now, it's funny that you should mention that, because whenever I interview people and I ask them about their origin story, there's always a turning point, someone or something that got the whole journey started. And of course, you mentioned a teacher that inspired you. This goes to show the value of educators in general, how influential they can be on a young person's mind, and perhaps even play an important role in guiding them towards certain careers.
Well, you know, Miss Ernestine was just marvelous. When I look back at many of my classmates, I recently, of all things, when I get together with people from my hometown, it's usually kids from my 5th grade class. This lady loved us to our excellence. She would come by every Friday and whisper something, a compliment about what we'd done that week. There are writers, there are authors, there are people who work for NASA. I mean, it's amazing what and that was just our one classroom, and she taught for nearly 40 years. So she by orders of magnitude inspired a generation. But it is so important because like I grew up very blue collar. My dad's a plumber, my mom's a seamstress. They didn't go on to higher education. And so to have a model that was like, wow, it's like that's possible, and somebody who's again just encouraging you. I can remember her saying things like, "Oh, you did some very great writing this week," or "You did some very great thinking this week." And I think that's where I base a lot of the praise and the wonder I try to generate for the students that I encounter is that, they really are geniuses.
Mhm.
And it's like if I can find that thing that lights them up and really go, oh my gosh, shall I call you Nobel Prize winner? Shall I call you professor? Oh my stars, this is genius work. If I can but turn that knob just a little, then that's where I feel okay, mission accomplished. It's like, again, I heard a great story, and it was a photographer in a Time magazine article. And he talked about that he was there to photograph the genocide that was happening in Rwanda.
Mhm.
And he starts to take a picture, and he rubs his eyes. He goes, man, my eyes must be blurry, because he thinks he sees movement. He goes again to take the picture, and yet again, he's like, he's pretty sure something just moved ever slightly. It took him a couple of hours to convince people that possibly they needed to go investigate that. When they finally did, they did find a gentleman barely alive. They brought him to safety, and they tried to give him a cup of water, but he couldn't take the cup. He could only take a drop.
Mhm.
And for 3 days, it was drop after drop after drop until the man could drink a full cup. And this photographer said his takeaway was, I realized in that time that I could never give someone a full cup, but I am responsible for that one drop. And so I think that was impactful to me to go, I may not be able to give every kid a full cup, but I can give as many kids who cross my path my one drop.
That is awesome, and definitely something that I'll take to heart as well. So now you've obviously you've been inspired, but you're still quite arty, but you still like the sciences. So then you went on to study at university.
I did. My undergrad, I went to Belmont University right here in Nashville, Tennessee. I got my degree in music and theater, which I love. I've always been a performer. It was funny in high school. Thank God I had this brilliant science teacher named Mr. Hughes who taught both math and like physics. So I would be taking band and drama and chorus, and then I'd go to algebra and chemistry. And so it was kind of like I still had one foot firmly in my nerd side and one foot firmly in my performer side. And when I did my undergrad, I really thought, I'm going to sing, I'm going to dance, I'm going to perform. And one of the first jobs that I got out of college was performing with and for kids at a theme park. And I was like, this is awesome. And every day that I walked in, I was beloved. It was like, it was hero worship. I was like, I dig this. It's like, they recognize my inner 10-year-old. And so even during that time, I was part of a group called Summer Rose and Ivy. We were on the same pitch sheets as Shania Twain and Toby Keith. So Mercury signed both of them to a record deal. I'm doing my fun little job at the theme park. And when Mercury and Polygram merged, our country music deal went away. And while it was a little disappointing and like I'm not sure where that trajectory could have taken me, I was like, I still get to work with the kids. And the longer that I worked with that, the park was closing about 1997. I realized, I really kind of enjoy this. What could I do? What could I do? So I looked around. Everybody had always called me Interplanet Janet. I'm not sure if South Africa has Schoolhouse Rock. I hope you do. But it was like, there's a song called Interplanet Janet. She's the galaxy girl. And
And obviously,
like,
Janet and Planet go well together.
That's right. And so I was like, I can't be interplanet Janet, but maybe Janet's planet. And I, again, dumb luck or just good guidance from some mechanism that is like, thank you. And I went ahead and got the service mark and trademark for Janet's Planet, not really knowing exactly what I was going to do. But when I looked around, I thought, how can I be different? What can I offer? And I saw Bill Nye the Science Guy and then Beekman's World, but there weren't any girls telling the science story. And I was like, how about that? It's a little narrow. It's a little narrow in its focus, but let's go do that. And it was a couple of years before the door opened for me at local Nashville Public Television. And they were, what do you want to do? And I gave them this big, grandiose half-hour, big series pitch. And they're like, we don't really have money for that, but we can find you some money to produce just some small, kind of 1 to 2 minute interstitials. And I was like, I'll take it. And so really built my career on delivering information about whether it was health, history, science, space, or something in these 1 to 2 minute bite-sized chunks.
Wow. So obviously Janet's Planet was not just Janet's Planet. It was about the planet Earth and covering a whole range of topics. When did you start moving towards the science, the space side of things?
You know what? That was always the intention, but I'll tell you the truth. It's like when your underwriters are coming in and they have a specific kind of subject matter, like Vanderbilt Children's Hospital sponsored me for a long time. And so theirs was very health related and safety and child nutrition and those kinds of things and exercise. So you go with the underwriter, but the eye was always on this space. And it probably wasn't until about 2008, a guy in town comes and's like, hey, we have the same last name, no relation, funny enough. And then he says, we should do a music. He goes, my kids really love Janet's Planet. Let's do a music CD. And I was like, okay. So we get about halfway into the music project. And I was like, I really love to do video. So in a very homegrown, self-funded way, we created a music CD and this DVD. Like we had everything, songs like Saturn Salsa and the Cosmic Chicken and Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. It was a kind of a tour through the solar system. And we pitched it to several places, got a little bit of distribution for that project. And of all things, again, this is the days. It's like, so entrepreneurs out there, beware. I'm sure this is not how you do it. This sounds like a kindergarten business plan. But I went on to LinkedIn. I was certain that if Richard Branson just knew me, he would want to invest in what I was doing for education. So I find this guy, and his name is Richard Godwin, but he had worked for Virgin Galactic. And I'm thinking, what do I have to lose? So I wrote this letter. Hi, I'm doing Janet's Planet, blah, blah, blah. Explain kind of like what my goal is. And he writes back and he goes, well, I'm no longer with Virgin Galactic, but I am the president of the National Space Society. If you don't do anything else for your company, you should head to, I think it was in Washington, D.C. You should head to Washington, D.C. and, get to know some of these folks. So it was interesting. I was winning an award in New York at the same time of this convention. And so I'm off to accept a Gracie Allen Award in New York. And so I called my attorney and I'm like, how crazy of an idea is this? You go, be my proxy, hand out our little DVD and just see what happens. And this guy's a very good friend. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. He goes, it's so crazy. It just might work. So he goes up and is my proxy. And this has been 2008. So it kind of meets people and meets the president of Space Florida for like 30 seconds, happens to hand him this, and I'm telling you, a little bit homegrown, homemade CD, DVD. And, we got a few emails back, but I even got one guy who wanted to make sure that I understood that space is a dangerous place and how dare I try to fun it up because kids needed to know this is no laughing matter. And I'm like, thank you. Got it. good stuff.
That's
So
why we're not sending kids there.
yeah, not yet. And so I was like, okay. So 6 months go by, and I'm literally standing in my husband's chiropractic office, and I see this number from Florida. I'm like, I don't know. So I answer the phone. Hi, Janet. This is Dr. Percy Looney from Space, Florida. We have been really watching your DVD. And again, I'm like, every once in a while, I'm wondering if my friends are punking me somewhere, right? Like, all right, I'm just going to listen to how this falls down. Yes. And so anyway, he continues and he goes, we have a mandate from the Stephen Hawking Foundation to take microgravity to Florida classrooms. But we also know our budget to take teachers into and onto the zero-G plane is going away. So with that mandate, would you be willing to produce about a half-hour program about microgravity? Now, Steve, I'm literally standing there going, yes.
You had me at hello.
Exactly. And so within and then it was like, yes, of course, yes, sir. Within weeks, less than 2, I'm in Florida being introduced and going to do this thing. And then in January of 2009, in the States, about the fall of 2008 and everything, it's like the market just crashed. So in January 2009, I'm getting closer and closer to a final edit. I'm going to fly. I got to fly twice on the zero-G plane. Remind me, and I'll send you the link so you can post it. For me, it's like I'm very proud of the work that we did for Space Florida. And so anyway, Percy calls me and he goes, Janet, I'm so sorry. Basically, our funds have been frozen due to all of the cutbacks and everything. We don't have the rest of the money to pay you to finish this. And I was like, sir, you have flown me twice in zero-G. Oh, I'm going to finish it. So I just, with my own money, self-funded the rest of it, and super, super proud of the end product. And so further in this crazy story of mine, in the fall of 2009, here we've already produced it. It's gone well. It won a STEM Florida award. It ended up winning an Emmy Award. I meet Buzz Aldrin is going to speak at the Southern Festival of Books in September, October of 2009. A friend of mine wins a Twitter contest to be the first in line to get Buzz Aldrin's autograph. And she goes, you should be the person, just get me a book signed. And I was like, thank you. So I'm enough of an entrepreneur and silly enough to believe that Buzz Aldrin would want to have a copy of the Exploring Microgravity DVD I did for Space Florida. So I go to hear his talk. It was on magnificent desolation. And I'm thumbing through it. He's flown aboard the zero-G plane like 5 times. So I thought, at least I've got an opening. So I'm first in line. You could get 2 books signed. And I said, I don't know if you'd be interested in what I did for Space Florida, but I flew on the zero-G plane explaining microgravity. And he looks up, he goes, are you from Florida? No, sir, right here from Tennessee, more like a communicator of science. Well, we need to know people like you. He pulls out his card. And I still have it. It's like one of my treasured possessions, and it's like Rocket Hero. I mean, who gets to put that on their business card, right? Like, I want a card that says Rocket Hero. So he takes the CD and everything, but again, it's like it's a mile long, the line. And again, I don't want to take too much of his time. So I spend the next probably week and a half drafting the best letter I can possibly, draft to a Rocket Hero, saying, here's what I want to do. I want to build with the raw material of mines. It's not titanium, but it's like, this is the power of the future. Here's what I want to do. Is there ever any story you would want me to communicate? And again, in that funny way, about 2 weeks later, I'm heading to teach an acting class. I get this call. Hi, Janet, this is Buzz. I just happened, and again, halfway thinking one of my friends is, pulling my leg. And so he invites me. He and his wife at the time were going to be in Memphis at the Blues Ball. And he goes, you ever go to Memphis? I said, I grew up. I said, my hometown of where I grew up with my family is very near Memphis. He goes, well, meet us there. Let's talk. And so what transpires in that is this uncanny friendship with Buzz Aldrin. He asked me to be part of his, at that time, it was called Share Science Ambassadors. He now has his Share Space Foundation. And yeah, every once in a while, he was in Nashville probably 4 or 5 months ago, he calls me. He's like, "Hey, Jan, I'm going to be in Nashville. Come hang out with me." And amazing, right? It's like a crazy story.
It's surreal, but I mean, that is just incredible. So now obviously you're moving towards a lot of space content and sharing that with students around the world and representing people like Buzz Aldrin, and you're on TV and you're doing radio, and you're doing a whole host of things.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden there's talk about landing on Mars. How has that changed your trajectory, so to speak?
Well, you know what? Again, a friend of mine that I met during some of those National Space Society meetings said, "Hey, I'm going to this conference at George Washington University. It's called Explore Mars. They're just starting out. I really think you should come. These people are really doing amazing work." And I have a tendency to say yes to anything that sounds fantastic and go, we'll figure it out how that all transpires. So literally it was on that trip. And I want to say that would have been probably 2012, 13. I mean, again, 4 or 5 years ago. And ended up meeting Artemis. And I don't even remember now exactly how it transpired, but it's like somehow they knew that I was doing education, and I get a call. Maybe I followed up with Chris Carberry, who's the president, and Artemis, who's the founder, and just said, "Hey, I'm out here doing space science for kids. Is there a message I can communicate while I'm out there on the road or in schools or something? You know, if you've got a message and I've got a platform to, communicate it, if that works for you, let me know." And so what's happened in the last couple of years, Mars has become such an amazing topic because we get closer and closer to getting there. What I always like to tell students, it's kind of like, and adults and teachers and policymakers, is that Mars is this great, wonderful tool because it's part aspiration, inspiration, destination, and all of that can only lead to innovation, because whatever we create on our way to Mars has numerous possibilities for being good and wonderful and possibly changing the lives and changing, places that have drought and don't have water. If we figure out how to find water on Mars, maybe we figure out how to find water in the most remote places that need it the most. So, yeah, it just, I would say to anybody out there listening, it's like, if the passion in your heart is strong in one direction, in one field, then you keep meeting with the luminaries and geniuses that stand there. Offer, volunteer, say, "Hey, how can I help?" I never went asking like, "Hey, how can you promote Janet's Planet?" That felt a little swarmy to me, but it's like I did say, "What can I do for you?" And that's allowed me to meet some incredible people that I don't know that I would have otherwise met. But Mars is just fun to dream about. I have to tell you.
Now, before we get on to the nitty-gritty about Mars, I have noticed a trend that, first of all, you don't know how to say no. and that is a good thing because it has led you to opportunities. Number two, you're quite comfortable with climbing out of your comfort zone. And then you'll just see what happens when you get there. And that has created opportunities. And you're also not afraid to go up to people and say, "Hi, I'm Janet. How can I be of service to you?" And when that happens, people go, "Well, since you're offering and no one else is, we'll take advantage of that." And I think that that's one of the reasons we're doing this interview. I got introduced because I said, when I heard about the Humans to Mars Summit, I said, "How can I get involved?" And a colleague, Ellen Stofan, said to me, "Well, I'll put you in touch with the organizers." And several years later, here we are doing interviews with many of the speakers and the guests and organizers of the summit. And we get to share our passion with STEM education and obviously the whole prospect of going to Mars. Now, let me ask you this. There's a wonderful movie that has just come out called Seat 25. And in the next week, I'm going to be interviewing Nick and Madeleine, who are the producer and the star of that movie.
Maddie is just fantastic. She is as moving an actress as I have ever seen. I'm so delighted you're going to share that with people. It's
well,
amazing.
I'm excited because, you know, I must just tell you that there's the Mars One project, which, you know, normally when you mention Mars One, people kind of look down and I mean, it's probably not going to happen purely because I don't think they've got the money or the expertise to make it happen. But in saying that, they have selected, they've shortlisted a group of people who are going to make the next batch. And I happen to know two of them from South Africa, and one in particular, Adriana Marais, who is just one of the most unbelievable people you'll ever meet. And I interviewed and I asked her, why on earth would you go on a one-way mission to Mars? You could die there. And her response was, you know what, I'm going to probably die on Earth. So if I had a choice to die on Earth or to die on Mars, it's a no-brainer. I would want to be that pioneer and be the first. So I'm sure that the movie, I haven't seen the movie C-25, but I'm sure that it's one of those situations where, you know, you win this lottery to be chosen to represent all of humankind, to go and settle on another planet. But then you have to justify to your family and your potential spouse that you are actually giving them up because you want to do something that is just incredible. That must be incredibly difficult to do.
I will tell you, you will be so moved by this movie. I saw it at the Raw Science Festival a couple of years back and sat there mesmerized. I'm telling you, Maddie Cook is just stunning. And you look at her, you see all of this emotion that's shrouding. She's gotten this kind of like golden ticket to get this last seat on this, you know, trip to Mars. And you see her struggle with all of those things that you said. It is just fantastic. And I think it also really kind of, whether it's Mars or college or your master's or whatever that thing is that seems like very different from your own circumstances or what other people in your community or tribe have done, but nevertheless you're like, but I really want to go and try that. It's this great kind of thought-provoking thing of like, am I willing to be as true to me as possible in the wake of how many people I might also disappoint or those who might disapprove? And
sure.
I, like I said, I've seen it, and it's like there's been talk that they may show it again this year at Explore Mars. I think Maddie and Nick are going to be there as well. Again, it's like I was even telling the local theater here, it comes out for U.S. release in a few months. I was like, you have to show it. It's so good. But I think the conversation of Mars has gotten more real the more that we've seen commercial space companies get involved, especially Elon Musk. I mean, Elon said much of what your friend Adriana said, that it's like he wants to die on Mars. And, you know, this as Mars has been looming out there since, you know, the 40s and 50s and Werner von Braun. And when you look at where we thought we would be by now, it's like, you know, it looked as though Mars was the next destination. I mean, the interesting thing that when you get into the nitty gritty of going to Mars, it doesn't have much of an atmosphere. So when you're even trying to land, you know, we can land rovers and all these other things, but you start talking about all the materials and these multiple ton vehicles that we need and people, and how do you land them softly enough that you don't break their necks on landing and entry? And then you have to consider, okay, what kind of reverse propulsion can we do there? And then radiation is going to be totally zapping you. Do you build, you know, Buzz Aldrin's kind of like model is that you build kind of a space station, or you kind of like camp out on Phobos or Deimos, and then you kind of come down to Mars for short-term missions and you blast back up there to the space station. Maybe that's one way we explore it until we can figure out how to create habitat and safety and propagate any kind of greenhouse effect or learn how to grow plants and stuff. But to me, it's like, it's such an interesting proposition. And maybe that's why I love it so much, that whatever we discover today could change the world and our solar system forever tomorrow, because it's like we're thinking about it, we're getting there. So I don't know, it's just a fantastic proposition in my mind.
Would you take seat 25, that ticket?
I would. I would. I would.
I had a funny feeling you'd say that.
Yes, without a doubt, it would be like I would sit my husband down and go, "You're going to be good. You have beautiful grandbabies, and you got sons who love you." I was never able to have kids, so it's like my stepkids. I love them. I love my daughter-in-laws. I love my 4 little step grandbabies to pieces. But it's like I'm going, what a legacy to leave them. Where'd your Jan Jan? How did your Jan Jan die? She died on Mars. Like that. It doesn't get better than that. Like, right.
Wow.
Who wants to die of like chemo or this or that or cancer or whatever, or Parkinson's and that sort of thing? Yeah. Make me an experiment. Let me know how old people fare on Mars. You know what I mean? So yeah, without a doubt, if they offer a ticket, I would be sad. It would be sad to go. And I'm sure there would be moments, even in seat 25, there is this poignant moment where you go, I could get a little lonesome, but I don't know. I think there's always been a bit of a gypsy spirit and explorer in me. And I think my husband would be like, baby, don't go. But I love you enough. I think he would let me. He lets me do a lot of what I love to do. I'm married to the most wonderful human who goes, that's my wife. She's somewhere in the cosmos tonight.
Well, I think it's amazing that you obviously have this, this passion, this dream about, traveling to Mars. It's obviously not an easy process. And we spoke to John Connolly last week, and he was saying that, Hollywood has got some of it right, and some of it is not necessarily true. For example, the storms on the planet are not nearly as severe as they make them out to be in the movies. But he says that, NASA is not planning to send people on a one-way mission. So it might still take quite a while till we actually get it right. So when do you think we're going to get it right?
It was interesting. Last year when they were talking about just space architecture and how that's going to look, Human to Mars and Explore Mars, really, they have high hopes that we will have the first boots on Mars by 2033. If you look at what, like the United Arab Emirates, they think it won't be until like 22, like that will be in the next century before that actually happens. So my personal belief is, let me take that back. My personal hope is that it happens sooner than when we roll over into 2201 and beyond. But I think, as I sat on a panel at Awesome Con this past weekend in Washington, listening to a planetary scientist talk about, we've learned how to send rovers there, but it's like we really won't know what's going on until we can have some kind of sample return mission. And they haven't figured that out. And she said for her, it's like until we can figure out how to even, return a few sample rocks to Earth, she's not sure she would sign up and go just yet. So her thought is that there's going to be a scalable thing where maybe there is some kind of orbiter built, or there's like, a smaller craft that lands on Mars that does some investigation and then can come back. But again, I think it's one of these things that as long as we're thinking about it and like putting a date out there on the calendar that we're hoping this to be true of, and marking 2033, like this is the best time for launch and, all of the ways to go. I just think that makes it more of a reality. I think as long as it hangs kind of in the ether and there's no particular date, it stays that much more far away. But again, it's like you also, when you listen to folks, you have things like planetary scientists or planetary protection people saying, do we have the right to go dirty up a planet? Because as soon as humans go, we're going to dirty it up with our own like bio stuff. I mean, how many microbes are living in your belly button right now, right? I mean, you can't sterilize this earth suit we wear. And so you kind of got those ethical issues. And then you've got the ethical issues of like when we send people there and should they procreate, would that offspring of those two Marsonauts ever be able to make their way back and visit Earth because of the way their bodies may or may not develop in a lessened gravity situation. So you've got some ethical things there going on. Will the human body, would a female even be able to fully birth a child in lessened gravity? What protocol would there be for propagating life on another planet? Would we have to evolve and become a bit human and a bit more Martian? I mean, again, fantastic ideas to ponder in the whole ethics thing. And then just human health factors, like the perchlorates that are in the Martian soil that blow around, that will harm your thyroid. The thyroid is a wonderful endocrine process that you need to happen for your metabolism. So, and if we're exposed to that much radiation, what then of cancer and all of those kinds of things that could become problematic? What happens to the mind of somebody? We saw, I don't know if you guys watched the Mars series, but it was like that was fantastic. Right? The guy who's kind of losing his mind in the greenhouse, you know, it's like he's longing for home. And so the myriad of tests that they're doing in some of these analogs. I know I saw something recently that in the Space Center Houston, they were looking for somebody to sign up for about, I don't know if it was 6 weeks or 6 months to be in a Mars analog. Again, just to test, it's like, what happens? I mean, some of the other tests they've had is that a portion of the folks who are living in this closed space environment, for the ones who kept to their routine, kept their circadian rhythms pretty much intact, really kept on task, kept the exercising up and everything, those are the ones who fared better. But the ones who kind of lost their sleep patterns, lost a lot of like connection and a lot, they're the ones that suffered. So even more mental health testing and, you know, kind of psychologically sound. I think that's where the exciting world of VR and AR will come in, because then say a forest or a lake or an ocean, you could put on your VR goggles, go to the beach, feel like you've had a taste of home, and maybe that improves your serotonin levels. So many factors to consider, but yes, if they want to send at some point, they want to send, because I'll be a granny, a super granny by the time they go in 2033. I'll be like, how old will I be? Let's see, I'm 51 now. So by 2030.
26 plus that.
Yeah, 67 or something. Granny on out there. I think if, you know, again, it's like if I thought that I could inspire a whole generation of people to reach for, you know, reach for Pluto and beyond, I don't know. It's a great question. My husband's going to watch this and like, what? No, you're staying at home.
It's funny, you know, if I had to go and tell my family and friends, listen, I've got the ticket, they'd be like, I know, we applied for you. We're sending you away, and you don't have to send any postcards. I'm kidding. So I recently watched a program called Titan. I don't know if you've seen that at all. That is a very interesting perspective on the fact that, you know, as humans, the earth is falling to pieces. So they've decided that if we're going to go live on the next best place, Mars was not the choice, it was Titan. But of course, we'd need to adapt the human body to live there. And they go through a series of scientific experiments to try and adapt the body to live on Titan, which is quite a fascinating approach.
It is, but when you think of it, Titan's the only moon that we know of, or, you know, that has its own substantial atmosphere. Now it's about 300 degrees below zero. It has lakes of methane on its surface. And here's my most favorite fact about Titan, that if humans could don a pair of wings, because its atmosphere is so thick and dense, all we'd have to do is just don a pair of wings, flap our arms, and we could fly about anywhere that we would want to go on Titan.
So that's why, okay, that would explain one of the scenes in the movie. Interesting. So, yeah. You know, I think that, you know, that's obviously a very ethical or it's a discussion of ethics in terms of would we be adapting humans to go and live on other planets. But now people are saying, why are we wasting our time going to Mars when we could fix things here on Earth? The only reason we're going there is because we're worried we're going to mess up our own planet and we're going to run out of space. Why don't we just, fix it up over here? We've got oceans. We haven't even explored 80% of that.
And you know what? I love this conversation because isn't that amazing? We have explored space more than we have explored our oceans.
Correct.
And on a planet that is 70% water, 80% of all life lives in our lakes, rivers, streams, and oceans, and then 99% of all the living space is actually underwater here on Earth. So amazing that we haven't explored that to the degree we've gone to space. My answer my answer is always this. When we look at what we've accomplished and what we've gained from the space program, for every dollar, I may be getting this equation wrong, but for every dollar that's been spent, it's like $8 in kind of like hardware and other goods have come back. We can thank GPS, we can thank weather satellites, we can thank NASA for radial tires on the space shuttle, microwaves, so many things that we have discovered either on the International Space Station or taking these other missions to other places. We've learned and we've been able to like bring that technology and innovation back to Earth. And while, yes, it's like, I think there are numerous problems that we have here on Earth. I think the question is, if we go to kind of like just human behavior, will we become better people? Will we have to work together because the conditions for survival will truly depend on collaboration, great communication, and kind of all for one? I did this exercise. So if anybody's out there listening that wants to do a great STEAM activity around Mars, ask your students to create a flag that will represent all of humanity. This came from a great gal that works down with Human to Arts, Jancy McPhee. And so she suggested I try this. So you give them all the materials and let them make a flag that represents not just one country, but represents the whole of humanity. And there were some lovely ones done last year. One had it was a human that had one color on one side, another color here, and it just beautifully said it was standing on this green and blue earth ball. And it says all for one and one in all. And I was like, oh, can we take that to our world leaders? So perhaps working on a shared goal of exploration can unite, can cross political and country boundaries. And is it possible that this talk of going, and it's because I'll ask this question, I'm all in and like, hey, sign me up, give me my suit, I'm ready to go. But there are kids like, nope, I want to stay right here. And so I say, then it's up to you to help us figure out how do we make it better here. Because I actually had a seventh grader ask me, it sounds like you just want to escape. And I was like, oh, you might be right. You might be right. Maybe I need to stick here and have you guys go and make sure I'm doing all that I can. I'm very encouraged. I think this generation of the young people of today, they're going to lead the way, and we're going to be astonished at what they can do. They now have more access to knowledge, and they can teach themselves anything, and they can find things on the internet. They can decide for themselves what is true and fake news and what is not true. I think the young and the youth, I think they're going to do great and mighty things. And I will stand in the balcony of their lives applauding and doing the Snoopy dance when they do great things.
I like that. So the big question is, do you think that Elon Musk, or perhaps even another country, will get there before NASA does?
I think it's entirely possible. But also remembering that NASA will always have some kind of imprint on any mission that goes there, because they opened up a lot of their technologies after the space shuttle. They retired that program. That it's like a lot of their a lot of their technology they put up for open source and things like that. So I kind of see it as it's not like one or the other, but it will kind of be that sort of sentiment of standing on the shoulders of giants for whomever reaches out there. And I think if another nation goes, be it, whatever space agency that might be, I still think there's going to have to be a grand partnership that makes that happen. And if it doesn't, I still think we will all stand and applaud and go, way to go. And especially if it's private space, because I would assume that even Elon Musk would say that as a kid, he was inspired by all the NASA astronauts and the things that happened there. So to me, it's really, maybe I'm being too altruistic, but to me, it's like, it's just a process of standing on the shoulders of giants and reaching farther and further.
Sure. Well, I know we've got quite a few viewers who are watching this live, and we'd like to thank you all for joining us live while you are there. And Janet, you had one or two people that you wanted to give a shout out to as well.
Yes, it's like if Ellis and Mafra are watching, I just want to say hi. Ellis has gone to space camp. Mafra is a great cook. She's actually made me breakfast before when I've been in their home. So girls, if you're watching, just know that we're both, like Steve and I are both very proud of you. Love the fact that you love science and just are going to be amazing young women doing great things in this world.
Now, you mentioned space camp, and you obviously stay quite close to where the space camps are based. What is a space camp? What is so special about it?
It's really quite special. It happens in Huntsville, Alabama, and probably also in Kennedy Space Center and Space Center Houston. But I'm closest to the facility there near Marshall Space Flight Center and the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville. And, space camp, it's like you get your suit, you get your mission. You really are getting to play astronaut and do the same kind of exercises and mission protocols that a real astronaut gets to do. So by the time that you finish your week in space camp, you really feel like, well, if I can accomplish that, what can I go back home and accomplish? It's just simply fantastic. So if you're a student or an educator, they have an educator space camp. So if you haven't done that, Steve, you should sign up one of these years and go. I'll go again with you. And again, or they even have like an adult weekend that you can do that. Again, if it's always been your dream to go, what exactly do they ask these astronauts to train for? And what you'll find as an adult doing it, again, all different kinds of personalities, all different kinds of ways of communication, and figuring out the best way that collaboration can happen. It's joyous in the moment. It can be entirely frustrating, but then it's joyous when the mission succeeds and you've done it as a group together. And there's quite a bit of magic in that. I don't know if you know astronaut Hoot Gibson. He flew the space shuttle 5 times, won the Yuri Gagarin Award, docked with the Russian probe, the Mir probe and everything. And I asked him one time, I said, because he also served in the chief astronaut office where he was partially responsible for choosing who would go on to become an astronaut. I said, so what was your criteria? What does an astronaut really need to have or not need to have? And he goes, we're looking for people who are good at what they do, are smart, have studied, all of that stuff. He goes, all the regular stuff you would assume. He goes, but the worst kind of person to have is a perfectionist. And I said, really? He goes, we were working with a guy, he goes, showed such promise. He would be on the simulator, nail it every single time. I mean, we're talking near perfect every single time. He goes, but we happened to be in the simulator kind of like running a mission, and the guy isn't perfect. And it goes completely haywire. And he goes, in that moment, he goes, because in space, you just got to go moment to moment. You don't have time to super regroup, no matter what Hollywood says. It's like it's got to be moment to moment, a decision. And he goes, I saw him fall apart and not be able to self-correct because he put so much pressure on himself to be perfect that he missed the opportunity to manage, self-correct, and still be able to carry out the mission. And he goes, I'm sorry to say he didn't proceed. He goes, I couldn't put him in space with anybody, knowing that if there was ever a time that he looked so inwardly at himself and judged that so harshly, that he couldn't function and make sure that he was carrying out his duties for everyone else. And I thought there was just such a interesting trait that he would look for, that it's like perfectionism isn't where it's at. It's like we won't always do it the perfect way, but if we can be present with what is, keep correcting, make decisions calmly and wonderfully. They say about Neil Armstrong that he was one of the coolest cats ever, that he was just undaunted by anything. He was always a decision maker. All right, that's happened. I got to hear Captain Sully speak, who landed on the Hudson, and he kind of had that same sentiment, although not an astronaut. Somebody in the audience said, how did you, because it was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds or something, he had to make a decision about landing on the Hudson. And he goes, you know what you hope is that for years, he goes, I studied water landings in a classroom, but never had to actually do one. And he goes, so the day that I had to make that decision, what I was counting on is that I had made enough deposits in my kind of inner and brain bank account, is that when I needed to make a large, withdrawal from that I had what I needed. And so that's what I would say to anybody listening. It's like, it's about ever building on that knowledge. I've heard Commander Chris Hadfield from Canada say that it's like, it's like what you may learn 12 years ago may come in handy on a mission one day. And so it's your responsibility to turn those tools and all that study into just mere muscle memory. And, he's got a great quote. It says, don't let life kick you into the adult you don't want to become. So set your course, take the micro steps that you need to do to become what it is you want to be. And you are kind of the master of your own ship, as it were.
Well, that would be easy if you knew what you wanted to be. How many teenagers, if you ask them when they're in their final year at school, what do you want to be when you finish school? And they go, I have no idea. But I'll tell you what I do want to do by the end of the summer. I want to go on holiday. So they only think that far ahead. But then someone like astronaut Abby, for example, since she was a young girl, she's been destined to be that first astronaut on Mars.
She is an inspiring young woman. And I think that's how it happens. For some people, I think it's like it's just in them since they were very young and they set a course. But for anybody out there who's like, I don't know what I want to do yet, let me just tell you, even sitting here at age 51, I'm still discovering that. You know what I mean? It's like if something interests you, read about it. They say that you can literally become an expert at something. If you read something every day for 7 years, you can become an expert in that particular field or maybe topic. You can really talk to me about quantum mechanics if you promise to read something every day in that subject matter. And that's apparently scientific, but that's what I've read. But I just think everything is always evolving, and you might find yourself thinking, I want to do music and theater. And then you find out that you have a gift of communicating that you can take into, and which is still art and theater, that you can take that art of communication into, well, I love science. How can I communicate that? Or I love to cook. I mean, if you love to eat a delicious meal, then you love chemistry. If you love, if you love the grand outdoors, then you've got a connection to kind of earth systems and biology. If you love, again, everything around us is science. And so I think why I love it so much is that it's this ever morphing, wonderful thing that it's like what we know gets changed by another discovery. And so if you still kind of are on the fence about, I don't know what I want to do, all I would ask you to do is just stay curious.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is a tough question now. You are an advocate for STEM, and you go out there and promote this to young people. And then you watch governments, and I'm not going to mention any in particular, that completely disregard the science, and even certain presidents who say today is cold, so there's obviously no global warming. How do you reconcile the fact that you're going out there to do what you can to promote STEM, and government literally is in complete denial?
You know, it's hard because I even find it, and I don't know if you guys deal with this where you are, but I even find that certain words like evolution can make people go running to the hills. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And even if you can show like facts and sedimentary rocks and the geology and give kind of an Earth, an Earth date kind of time, it is very difficult. But I will tell you that I think that's what maybe motivates me even more. That again, it is cold here in Tennessee, and it is April the 3rd. It should be a warm spring day, but it's like there's a forecast of snow on April 7th. You know what I mean? Like we may see snowflakes then. So all that I can do is like, yes, it may still be cold, but that is not natural. That is not what normally is happening. So something in our climate is changing, evolving, moving. And, I won't lie to you. It's like if I try my best not to offend any particular group or belief system. And so if the E word doesn't jive well with their particular belief systems, I'll just stay away from that word. I don't feel like I'm robbing them of giving still a good science or STEM or STEAM presentation. But I also think it's this thing, the more that you just allow people to be who they are, believe how they are, but you present science in a way that isn't scary, it isn't so lofty, it isn't so I guess maybe condescending. And I think sometimes that's why science, like people like Bill Nye the Science Guy or Astronaut Abby or Neil deGrasse Tyson and some of the other luminaries out there that are communicating science so well, is that it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson has a way of absolutely making you just feel so comfortable. My husband and I heard him speak here a couple of years ago on my birthday. It was the best birthday present. This man kicked off his loafers, was walking around in sock feet, and he talked for nearly 3 hours straight, and then took questions until midnight, and was bold enough one time, and I don't even remember the question now. Somebody asked me, he goes, "You know what? I don't know that. I'm an astrophysicist. I don't know everything, but you've made me curious. I'm going to go check that out. Thank you for asking such a great question." So I think it's just up to us to be better marketing advocates for science, and say, hey, you know what? It's kind of like, I'm going to offer, this is what I'm offering you. Now I'm going to hope that you will take it upon yourself to go, that's curious. I don't know if I agree with that. But if you don't agree with it, I want you to get inspired to begin to do your research of why you don't believe in it. Oh, wow, maybe Janet's just piqued my curiosity enough that I'm kind of undoing the layers of the onion a little bit more. Oh, the world is bigger and more complex. And I always say to, like I said, I don't know that where I currently live, I can't exactly fight the current political dynamic that is sometimes in our country. But what I can do is I can continue to stand up, show up, and say, here's what I have for you. Take what you might appreciate and what you might enjoy. Go and stay curious. And even if there are things that you don't understand, fall in love with the mystery. Because this beautiful, amazing world of ours is still full of beautiful, intricate mysteries waiting for us to unearth and discover.
Wow. Well, I think on that note, if we could give one parting shot, one bit of wisdom that you would like to impart on young people today. I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but in essence, what is it that you would want from a legacy point of view to leave behind with young people with regards to STEM and science and space and Mars and planets and anything like that?
I think that it's just the fact that, as Carl Sagan said, that we are star stuff. From the iron in our blood to the calcium in our teeth to the carbon in our DNA, that you literally are 100% star stuff. We're related to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the universe atomically. And so when you start to get a grasp of how amazing all of that is, that you really are the shining stars of this next generation of scientists and engineers and technologists and mathematicians and artists, and you're going to make this world a better place. And I just want you to start brimming out and shining that light brightly forthly, and for all of us adults to see, because the world is in desperate need of your genius. So go shine that, go be that, go explore that. And for all you ladies out there and gentlemen, just remember that smart is the most beautiful and awesome thing you can be.
I love it. I love it. But now there's one thing I have to ask, and that is, what is Janet's plan for the next couple of years? Because, you know, you're obviously still involved with Janet's Planet, and you're doing a lot of school shows and public shows. Have you written any books? And are you planning to write anything new? What's on the agenda for you in the next couple of years?
Buddy, you should ask that, Steve. I gave a speech a couple of years ago at a conference called Unsung Genius, Heroines of Science. So we're working on the book series, and this is basically just to tell the stories of women you potentially have never heard of. So I'll throw out a name. You probably have heard of. Have you ever heard of Mary Anning?
Mary Anning? Nope, I have not heard of Mary Anning.
You got to know, because she, at age 11, she and her brother found the first ichthyosaur on the coast of Lyme Regis, or on the coast of Dorset, in this little place called Lyme Regis. She went on, she was not educated. Her parents were dissenters. This was kind of between 1799 and 1843. So she learned to read and write in Sunday school, but she did not, about age 8, she just decided not to go to school. She loved discovering these curiosities on the beach. So I could talk all day about her. Just look up Mary. The first.
I love this.
She was a female. She was really a paleontologist before that word had even been invented. She informed a lot of the great discoveries at that time. But that's what we're working on right now, is to create a book series called Unsung Genius, Heroines of Science, and talk about everybody from Mary Anning to Gertrude Elion to Hedy Lamarr, Ada Lovelace, which a lot of people know about. But sometimes when you ask somebody about a female scientist, they'll go Marie Curie. But there were so many more. That Henriette Leavitt was one of the first original human computers. So that's what I see myself in the next couple of years doing, because I'm presenting this a couple of times with some Girl Scouts. So what we're going to do is let them find a female scientist that most likely has never been heard of. I've got an entire list. And then we'll explore some of the ones I'll present to them. They'll present their findings, and then they will conclude with writing a letter to their future self about what their genius may look like in the future. So that's one of the things. And then I've been pitching this idea. So if anybody out there in TV land wants to help me with this, but I want to create a show where we go around the world looking for 6 to 18-year-olds who are innovating and creating. Like there's a young man in Malawi who just created a wind turbine for his village out of recycled parts. Or there's Richard Terreri, who created lion lights, who found out that lions don't like moving lights. So he virtually saved the cattle ranch.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then there's the 11-year-old girl who just won a big science prize for figuring out how to wet test Flint, Michigan water. So I would love, like if I had another like just passion project for me, a camera guy and an audio guy, to travel the world and find these stories of young geniuses, showcase what they're doing to make their world better. That's a goal of mine as well. So I've got several little passion projects that I, sometimes as as a creator and an entrepreneur and you own your own company, you tap dance hard over here to make the money to keep everything going. But really telling the story of some of these women that you possibly have never heard of, I think could be very powerful. Getting more girls involved in STEM and STEAM, and then just to showcase the geniuses out there. I would love to do that. And then we'd partner them with a patent person, and who knows, maybe take some, it would be like a youth Shark Tank. So I don't know. Well, anybody out there listening?
You should mention that. You know, there's a national science expo competition in most countries. And when I was up in Namibia, I was very fortunate. I was doing some shows there to go and see some of the exhibits at the expo. And there was this one kid who brought out this project. It was just a cardboard box with little knobs and buttons and switches on. And I asked him, what does it do? And you must remember, he comes from an incredibly rural town where, you know, if the family makes more than $5 a month, I mean, that would be way, you know, highly unexpected. And he said to me that his project is quite unique because it's kind of like a cell phone. So I opened the box. There was no cell phone in it. And I said, so how does it operate? And he said, dial a number. So I dialed the number and it started ringing. And then he said, now end the call. So I ended the call and he carried on the conversation through this box with a little speaker and a microphone. So it had picked up the radio frequency and then copied it somehow, and then he just continued with a free phone call. And I said to him, you know, that is so brilliant that I would love to get the people from Google Science Fair to check it out, because I've got a couple of contacts. And I said to him, whatever you do, do not go and sign anything. Right. Because at the end of the day, someone is going to take advantage of this. And I got back to South Africa and I contacted the organizers and I said, I'd love to chat to him because I want to put him in touch with the Google people. And they said to me, you're going to have to go through the Namibian telephone company. And I said, why? Because they had obviously made him a deal. They had got him to sign something and paid him a nominal amount of money. And then that project will go and sit on a shelf and never be seen again. So, and I've heard of people who go to science fairs with, you know, entrepreneurs who go along to pick up ideas before they've registered these ideas, and they turn them into viable businesses.
Well, the geniuses out there, I was in Trinidad a couple of years ago teaching down there. And so I did this whole talk about what can you create, showed them some kids around the world doing this, you know, phenomenal things. And this high school student came back the next day and I said, so I want you to come back. And I said, I want you to look around in your own backyard. Those are the best inventions. It's like what solves a problem. And so a kid comes back with this idea to make roofing tiles. He goes, what if we made them out of PVC pipe? And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because then you could, and I was like, have they done it before? So we did a little bit of research. They'd done it before. I said, let me get you in touch with a patent guy who's got over 33 patents. So Tom and this young man communicated via internet, and Tom really encouraged and says, even if your idea if you can improve on what's already been invented, then it's a great idea. But I thought, he took it to heart that what could I do, because these other tiles are too heavy and, you know, too expensive to replace. If we made them out of PVC pipe, they're more durable, etc. So again, it's the geniuses out there. It's like, how do we make sure we honor it and protect it in the most precious of the planet and the vulnerable? But I've seen amazing things that kids are doing from around the world, and I would love to showcase that sometime.
Well, for those of you in TV land, you have heard. For those of you that are in National Geographic land or even the internet, there is definitely scope for a wonderful project. So, Janet, I would like to say thank you very much. Unfortunately, we didn't have people joining us live in the interview because most of them were watching it live from the YouTube that was on livingmaths.com. And also it is spring break, so I'm told, and April school holidays here in Cape Town, South Africa. So most of the schools that we're working with, everyone is gone. But the good news is that at least they can watch this video when they get back and they can still share the information with their colleagues and their friends and their teachers. So I'd like to thank you very much for giving up of your time. I know that you're a very busy person. And for those of you that are able to get to the Humans to Mars Summit, it's happening, I think, from the 8th to the 10th of May. And it's happening in Washington, D.C. So for those of you who can get there, please do so. If you'd like to chat to me about maybe getting a discount, I think I can pull some strings for you.
I've got a discount code myself.
Me too. So we're going to try and get them all to come. So, and obviously, if you get there, you'll get a chance to meet Janet live and in person. I assume you're going to be there.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be there. We're doing some great activities with kids in the afternoon of the 8th. And so if you're traveling with a kid, they could come and do our hands-on activities. We're going to be creating Martian habitat with 3D pins and doing some fun stuff with the Challenger Center folks there in Washington, D.C. On Thursday, I'm really excited about the programming there. If you're a student in near DC, you can get that full day free with just the promo code Student Mars. If you're an adult and need a discount, you can use Janet Mars as my code. But on that Thursday, there's going to be so much talk about AR, VR, artificial intelligence. It's going to be a robust day of all of the breaking technology that's really going to transform not only our world, but space travel.
You do realize that you've now opened up a can of worms, and I'm going to have to sit and interview again on a whole bunch of other topics, because I know at least it's something that interests you and that you like to share this knowledge. So Janet, thank you so much for your enthusiasm and your passion. It's nice to see that I'm not one of the only custodians of preserving the excitement for STEM and sharing that with young people. Obviously, that is something that you're passionate about as well. And we hope that when I do get to the States in either this year or possibly the following year, when we do our first space camp tour, we will definitely get to connect face-to-face as well.
It sounds brilliant, my friend. Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. You can find me at janetsplanet.com or on Instagram, Janet's Planet Official, Facebook, Janet's Planet. But yeah, reach out. And if you've got questions or want some curriculum, I'm going to send that on over to Steve. So be happy to share all of that as well.
Awesome. So I'm going to stop the broadcast over here.